It's 5 p.m. across India. I'm Shubhendu Ghosh, live from New Delhi. You're watching DD India Global, bringing you all the day's big stories from across India and the world. With me today from London is my colleague, Ollie Barrett. Ollie, it's good to see you.
You too, Shubhendu. It is 11:30 a.m. here in the UK, 12:30 p.m. across Central Europe. Coming up in the next 30 minutes, we will get you the very latest from the Israel-Hamas war, what Australia's Prime Minister is saying about relations with China, and Donald Trump due to testify in court. First, the headlines.
Israel rules out Gaza ceasefire without release of all hostages, says it has exposed Hamas's tunnel network underneath the war zone's hospitals. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese meets Chinese President Xi Jinping in Beijing. Leaders discuss military cooperation between the two nations. Kremlin denies reports that Vladimir Putin will compete in March presidential elections. Putin continues to be the longest-serving Russian president. Israeli National Security Minister assessed a scene of a Jerusalem stabbing attack on Monday. Police says 2 Israeli police personnel were stabbed near Old City of Jerusalem earlier in the day. A 16-year-old Palestinian stabbed 2 officers near an Old City police station. The incident unfolded amid heightened tensions linked to the ongoing 31-day Gaza conflict. The Israeli military released a video on Monday showing their troops firing at Hamas's targets as airstrikes escalated in Gaza. These airstrikes have led to significant smoke plumes, with Israel Defense Forces reporting that fighter jets have targeted 450 locations associated with Hamas in Gaza. The Israeli army also claimed to have exposed network of Hamas tunnels, command centers and rocket launchers beneath, adjacent to hospitals in northern Gaza. For the latest, Amritpal Singh, my colleague, joins us live from near Israel-Lebanon border. Amrit, what is the latest on the conflict and what are the implications of Israeli claims of having split Gaza into 2?
Okay, Shubhendu, as you said, that the war or the conflict has entered the 31st day. It's almost a month since it all started with about 2,500 Hamas guerrillas, terrorists, fighters, whatever you want to call them, crossing into Israel and affecting the mayhem that they did. Now, you know, what happened after that is that the Israeli army, the Israeli Air Force pounded targets inside in the Gaza Strip, which it continues to do so. But its ground forces have now reached the gates of Gaza. Their tanks, with some artillery fire, they are now getting into the phase of close combat. That's why they've been asking people to leave, because Gaza City or northern Gaza is the stronghold of the Hamas. Their military strategy is to, you know, weaken Hamas, the Izzuddin al-Qassam brigades, the militant wing of the Hamas, cause as much damage to them as possible, get into the tunnels if so required, or flush Hamas out of the tunnels, and then get into close combat. There are challenges because there will be, you know, a lot of civilian deaths. The IDF continuously says that Hamas is stopping the civilians from leaving Gaza. About 10 lakh of them have already, or about 1 million of them have already left Gaza and moved to southern Gaza, but about 300,000 still remain there. And the IDF says the Hamas would be using them as human shields. So basically, when that operation gets towards could be launched anytime. It's already launched. I mean, you could see close battles in another 24 hours to 48 hours. When that happens, it'll be the devil's playground, really. So the Israeli army would also, take a lot of hit. They have lost about 20-odd soldiers till now, though the IDF does not confirm that number, but it does say that it has lost its soldiers. It says it's lost commanders, including battalion commanders. So that's where the war is going. Now, the other question that you asked me, what does it mean when they say we've split Gaza into two? Their strategy is to attack the northern Gaza, which is, Gaza city is there, which is the operational base of Hamas, or the stronghold of Hamas. They continue to pound targets through aerial strikes in southern Gaza as well. Wherever they think there are, they attack the Maghazi camp. The Jabalia was attacked consistently. So wherever they believe that the Hamas is hiding, but their main operational command centers are in northern Gaza. They claim that they've taken over one particular military compound of Gaza and found a lot of tunnels, etc., cache of weapons, which the Hamas has amassed. So their idea is to militarily weaken Gaza in the north. Then if they run towards the south, chase them and get into close combat. So that's what they mean when they say they've divided into two. They're asking people to move to south because they want to first clear up the north. Shivendu?
There, Amritpal, thank you very much for joining us with those updates from the conflict zone of the Gaza conflict. And tensions seem to be on the rise between Israel and Lebanon amid recent incidents of strike on a car in southern Lebanon last Sunday that killed 3 children and their grandmother. Israeli army armored vehicles were seen moving along northern Israeli roads close to the border with Lebanon in an apparent sign that all is not well on the nation's frontier with Lebanon. US Secretary of State Blinken met with his Turkish counterpart Hakan Fidan on Monday, held talks over the Gaza conflict. During the meeting, both leaders discussed ways of working towards a durable, lasting peace in the Middle East.
We've also had very important conversations throughout this trip with countries in the region on the role that everyone can play in making sure that the conflict doesn't expand, doesn't spread to other countries. And of course, we remain very focused on the hostages held by Hamas, including Americans, in making sure we're doing everything possible to bring them home. One of the common denominators that I've heard throughout this trip is the imperative of American engagement, American leadership. Every country I talk to is looking for us to play a leading role with our diplomacy to try to make progress on all of these different aspects of the crisis.
Iraqi Prime Minister Mohammad al-Sudani visited Tehran on Monday for talks on the conflict between Israel and Hamas. Al-Sudani met US Secretary of State Antony Blinken on Sunday as Washington stepped up diplomacy in a bid to prevent a wider regional conflict. Iraqi armed groups aligned with Iran have threatened to target US interests with missiles and drones if Washington intervened in support of Israel against Hamas. Meanwhile, the Russia-Ukraine war drags on. Ollie Barrett is in London, gives us more on this and other stories making headlines around the world. Ollie, over to you.
Thank you very much indeed, Shibendu. Yes, indeed, as you say, according to the Chinese media, Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has met with Chinese President Xi Jinping on Monday. Australia's Prime Minister says that Australia has an interest in the continued stable development of China's economy and its relations with the world. He's also visited Beijing's Temple of Heaven, retracing a walk made 5 decades ago. Albanese became the first Australian leader to visit China since 2016, when he landed in Shanghai on Saturday. Albanese's government has taken credit for stabilising ties with China since coming to office last year. And we can go now to Singapore, where DD India's Patrick Fock is standing by. Patrick, can you tell us a bit more about what has been said in that meeting between Xi and Albanese and how the Australian Prime Minister has been received in China?
Well, Anthony Albanese was received at the Great Hall of the People in the Chinese capital, and President Xi is reported to have said to his Australian counterpart that the relationship had embarked on the right path of improvement and that he was heartened to see stable relations between the two countries and that it had come about because of the joint effort of both governments. As you say, the Australian Prime Minister has taken credit for the stabilisation of relations. It has been an absolute top priority for his government to mend ties with Australia's largest trading partner since he came to office about a year ago. And he has had considerable success in the lead up to this trip in particular. China has removed most of the trade restrictions imposed on Australia in 2020 following a series of diplomatic disputes. In recent weeks, we've also seen the release of Australian journalist Cheng Lei, who was detained for 3 years on unspecified national security grounds. And by all accounts, the Australian Prime Minister's visit has been very much welcomed by the Chinese. But analysts say that China won't want to dwell too much on what's happened over the past few years. Ultimately, that has in many ways backfired against Beijing, with Canberra moving closer towards Washington as a result of that. And, you know, China in particular will want to promote this narrative that it is Australia essentially coming back into the fold and doing what is in its national interests.
Patrick, in recent days, China does seem to be making efforts to improve relations with the US, the UK and now Australia, despite some major differences. Can you tell us why?
Well, you know, President Xi has come under quite a lot of criticism in recent months, particularly from party elders, because of his foreign policy approach, which has in many ways isolated China from Western countries and damaged relations that had taken decades to build. And so perhaps there is a bit of a sense that he is taking a different approach, particularly at a time when China's economy is slowing significantly. He is perhaps taking a more pragmatic approach now to foreign relations, and you know, in the same way that Australia is. The mantra of the Albanese government has been to cooperate with China where it can, disagree where we must, and engage in our national interests. One of the interesting things also today, though, you mentioned that visit to the Temple of Heaven today, retracing the steps of the former Australian Prime Minister that went there in 1973, a year after the two countries established diplomatic ties. Reporters after that visit probed the Australian Prime Minister on whether or not he trusted Xi Jinping. He did not say specifically that he did, but he said that he was building rapport with the Chinese president. So in a sense, China still has a long way to go to build that trust with Australia and with governments where those relationships have been damaged in recent years.
OK, Patrick, thank you. That's DD India's Patrick Fock in Singapore. Next to Ukraine, where the country's defence minister has ordered an investigation after a Russian missile strike killed 19 soldiers from Ukraine's 128th Assault Brigade in Zaporizhia last week. Russia also launched a major air attack on the Ukrainian Black Sea port of Odessa late on Sunday, injuring at least 8 people, setting ablaze grain trucks and damaging one of the city's principal art galleries. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov has denied reports that claimed Russian President Vladimir Putin has decided to compete in March presidential elections. Peskov said that Putin has not made any announcements that he will run for another term, and the campaign has not yet been announced. Vladimir Putin has served as Russian president longer than any other leader. And Vladimir Putin is scheduled to visit Kazakhstan on November the 9th. The two countries' leaders are set to have a bilateral meeting in the capital Astana. Putin and Kassym-Jomart Tokayev will also join the Kazakh-Russian business conference that's due to be held in the city of Kostanay. Former US President Donald Trump is due to testify on Monday in a New York civil trial, accusing the former president of fraudulently inflating his wealth. State prosecutors are seeking to bar Donald Trump from doing business in his home state and $250 million in damages. DD India's Ira Spitzer reports.
New York Attorney General Letitia James has accused Donald Trump and others at the Trump Organization of inflating the value of assets by billions of dollars in order to obtain better terms on loans and insurance policies. Trump has denied those charges and called the proceedings biased, setting up a courtroom confrontation. Last week, Trump's two sons, Donald Jr. and Eric Trump, both testified and tried to distance themselves from the accounting aspects of the family business. That may prove more difficult for the former president, since he is the owner of the Trump Organization, whose companies are involved in real estate and other ventures, and ran it until becoming president in 2016. Even before the trial, the judge ruled that fraud had been committed, so now it's essentially a matter of determining how serious the penalties should be, something that will also be decided by the judge and not a jury. Because it's a civil trial, Trump can't go to jail, but prosecutors have sought to fine him and others as much as $250 million and revoke the organization's ability to continue operating in New York, where it has properties such as the Trump Tower in Manhattan. It's one of several trials that Trump is facing as he seeks to regain the presidency in elections next year. The former president is currently the frontrunner to be the Republican Party's nominee to challenge Joe Biden. Ira Spitzer reporting in San Francisco for DD India.
The conflict in the Middle East is expected to dominate the agenda when top diplomats from G7 countries meet in Tokyo on Tuesday. The foreign ministers are wrapping up a year of G7 meetings as Japan looks to successfully conclude its presidency of the group. DD India's Chris Gilbert reports from Tokyo.
Well, when the G7 foreign ministers meet here in Tokyo next week, it is going to be the conflict in the Middle East that will be top of the agenda. That wasn't always the case. When Japan's foreign minister Yoko Kamikawa originally called this summit back in September, the goal was simply an end-of-year catch-up, a wrap of all the meetings, G7 meetings so far, a catch-up on how member countries are doing on their goals and their priorities stated in those meetings, such as countering perceived Chinese military assertiveness while maintaining independent economic and diplomatic ties with Beijing, supporting Ukraine in its conflict against Russia, cooperating on climate change and AI regulation and a myriad of other topics. But it is going to be Israel's ongoing bombardment of Gaza, democratic calls around the world for a ceasefire. These issues are going to be discussed. Japan is going to be concerned. It is going to be wary of analysts' speculations that the U.S. resources, the military resources going towards Israel at the moment and going towards Ukraine at the moment, may be depleting military resources that could be coming in this direction towards Japan, towards South Korea, and the U.S.'s ability, pledged ability to protect Japan and South Korea's interests in what it calls a free and open Indo-Pacific. Japan is going to be looking for reassurances from U.S. State Secretary Antony Blinken that this part of the world remains a priority for the U.S., and certainly a meeting that South Korea is going to be watching very closely as well. Chris Gilbert in Tokyo reporting for DD India.
Certainly a lot for those G7 ministers to talk about. Shubendu, back to you in the studio.
Thanks very much, Ollie, for joining us with those updates. And in Bangladesh, second day of countrywide 48-hour blockade is underway. That's after a short break. And another earthquake of 5.6 magnitude hits Nepal again.
Wherever news breaks, whatever it takes.
Connecting corners, cutting across continents.
Stories that matter from across the globe.
Accurate, authentic journalism that serves you right. From politics to glamour, from sports to world affairs, with a fusion of aesthetics and substance. Introducing news in a new avatar. Experience the world through a new lens. Stay tuned to DD India for an exciting journey beyond borders.
Welcome back. You're watching DD India Global. I'm Shubhendu Ghosh. Another earthquake of 5.6 magnitude hit Nepal on Monday, soon after search and rescue operations concluded, following the 6.4 magnitude earthquake on 3rd November. The focus has now shifted to providing essential aid, including food, shelter, medical care to survivors affected by the powerful quake in the northwestern province of Karnali. The disaster has caused at least 157 casualties, left over 200 people injured. In neighbouring Bangladesh, the second day of the countrywide 48-hour blockade is underway today, with some incidents of violence and arson. The blockade is being enforced by the main opposition party, Bangladesh Nationalist Party (BNP), and its allies to force Sheikh Hasina's party to quit and hold elections under neutral administration. The 48-hour-long blockade sparked stray incidences of violence, where more than 15 buses were burnt throughout the country. The European Union has expressed concern over the clashes around the party's rally held on October 28th. African policymakers and foreign investors are set to discuss a roadmap for extraction and value addition of critical minerals like copper, cobalt, lithium at a summit in South Africa. The minerals found in many African countries are essential components in today's rapidly growing clean energy transition. DD India's Chris Okamrenga has more from Kinshasa.
The African continent is endowed with huge mineral deposits. In recent years, the demand for minerals such as copper, cobalt, lithium, and nickel has risen significantly due to the global shift from fossil fuels to clean energy. The Democratic Republic of Congo is one of the African countries with large reserves of those minerals, but its population has drawn little benefit from that wealth because of decades of conflict and corruption.
Things are getting a lot better now with the lithium that we know is there now, so there's a lot of effort to make it better. Airplanes flying to Manono. But nonetheless, there's quite a lot of work to do on the social scale, and medical facilities, children, and schooling, and just making sure people eat every day. So big challenges. Yeah.
Policymakers on the African continent will be meeting at the Critical Minerals Summit in South Africa to try and improve local supply chains and establish sustainable practices. They believe fostering collaboration and innovation will create more jobs and drive economic growth.
We want to enable the local population to become experts and be able to offer services to us and to other companies through a skill transfer program.
The officials will also discuss the development of diverse and sustainable clean energy supply chains at the summit. Critical minerals are essential for economic development and national security. Mining experts are seeking to ensure that the supply of those minerals continues as the world embraces clean energy technologies and transitions towards a sustainable future. Chris Ochamringa in Kinshasa for DD India.
Let's now take a look at other stories making news around the world. Tokyo authorities on Monday held a missile evacuation drill to help residents get ready amid growing concerns over North Korea's test launches of ballistic missiles. Around 60 residents participated in the drill. North Korea fired 59 missiles in 2022 and most recently fired 2 short-range ballistic missiles into the sea off its east coast on September 13th. To mark its 50th anniversary of foundation, the Korean Broadcasting System held a Korean language competition program. Out of 262 people from France, US, Egypt and Vietnam participated in the competition. 8 people reached Korea to take part in the final. Pope Francis on Monday skipped reading a prepared speech for a meeting with European rabbis, telling them he was not feeling well. Francis appeared to be short of breath. He lastly delivered a speech on Sunday during the Angelus Press. Colorful hot air balloons illuminated by their burners' flame dazzled crowds at a festival in Saga City in southwestern Japan. About 50 balloons were placed on a riverbed on Saturday. People cheered and took photos as spectacular music and light show unfolded before their eyes. Top oil exporters Saudi Arabia and Russia have decided to prolong their additional voluntary oil output cuts until the end of this year. The two countries have confirmed that they will review the cuts next month to consider the possibility of extending, deepening or increasing the reductions. The decision to extend the voluntary output cuts aligns with the ongoing efforts of OPEC Plus countries to maintain market stability. OPEC Plus has been implementing production cuts since last year. These measures are seen as proactive actions to prevent any potential destabilization of the oil market. And that's all for this edition of DD India Global. We'll be back with another global edition at 7:30 p.m. IST. You can connect with us on Facebook, X, formerly Twitter, and Instagram. You can also find us online at ddindia.co.in. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Shubhendu Ghosh. From all of us here in Delhi, thanks for watching DD India Global. Namaskar.